welcome to the first episode of English and a Cup of Tea. So today we're going to be looking at the second conditional. We're going to start off by talking about what is the second conditional and when do we use it. Then we'll look at the structure of the second conditional. We'll look at some examples and we'll also focus a little bit on pronunciation and stress. But first, let's talk about my tea. So today we are drinking PG Tips, just a typical black tea. It's not my favorite, but my favorite is Lion's tea and you can't get that here. So it's the next best thing. So the trick of making a nice cup of black tea is to really squeeze the bag. I actually leave it in as I pour the milk and then I just give it a good squeeze. Now, there we go. So, let me show you what it looks like. That's my tea. Delicious. Okay, so let's start by looking at what is the second conditional. So the second conditional is an imaginary or an unlikely situation that can happen either in the present or in the future. We combine a hypothetical condition with a probable result. Let's look at an example. Imagine we have the sentence, if I won the lottery, I would buy a house. Okay, so this situation, it's not very likely to happen. But if we did win the lottery, if that did happen in the future, then our following action would be to buy that house. As you can see from that example, with conditional sentences, we have two clauses. We have our if clause, and then we have our main clause. So we divide it up into two parts. Let's look at the first part. Let's look at the if part. In order to make the if part, we will start the sentence with if, then we will add a subject. So I, you, he, she, it, etc. After that, we will add the past simple. Now there is one exception to this. There is one exception to this, which is the verb to be. When we are using the verb to be, we usually use the were form. Colloquially, you can use was, but it's recommended to use were if you're going to an exam. So that is the first part of a conditional sentence. Then after that, we would use a comma and then we would start our second clause. In our second clause, we start with our subject. There we go. Yes, more. We start with our subject, and after our subject, we would use would. Now, would is always followed by the base form of the verb. So that's the infinitive of the verb without to. So let me give you an example. If we're going to be using the word study, then we would say would and then study, not would to study. Okay? So let's put that all together. We have if plus subject plus past tense, comma, subject plus would plus base form of the verb. Let's look at an example. If he studied harder, he would pass the exam. Let's have a look at pronunciation. So when we're using the word would, we can either use it in the full form would, or we can break it down and use apostrophe D. So let me give you an example. If I were rich, I would travel to Asia. In this sentence, we are using the full form would. However, we can also say, if I were rich, I'd travel to Asia. As you can see there, I've used the form I'd. Now, when we are using a sentence, we focus the stress on the key content words, so not the function words. What does that mean? In this sentence, the key content words would be rich and travel. We don't focus our stress on would or where. So let's listen again. If I were rich, I'd travel to Asia. Did you see what I did there? Now, let's look at a question that you could be asked in the exam. It's very important that when you're asked something in the exam that we analyze what we're being asked and how we should answer these questions. So a typical question you could be asked in, let's say, the Cambridge exam, maybe B2, C1, could be, if you had the chance to live abroad for a year, where would you go and why? When we're asked this, we have to analyze the question. Now, this obviously is a second conditional question because that's what we're looking at today. So what you need to do is think about how you can impress the examiner. Obviously, we want to show the examiner that we know how to form a sentence in the second conditional. So we need to use that in our answer. It's not important to use the second conditional in your whole answer, but you definitely do want to stick it in there somewhere. Perhaps we could start by answering the first part of the question with a conditional sentence, and then we can give more information using different tenses, and maybe at the end add in another conditional sentence. It's up to you, but just make sure that you really add in a conditional structure, whether that is the simple structures that we have been looking at today or a different, more complex structure. Let's take a look now at a possible answer to that question. So let's have a look at the question again. So the question was, if you could spend a year abroad, where would you go and why? So the way I would start the answer to this question would be in the most natural way possible. We need to show the examiner that we've understood the question, but we also want to be fluent in our answer. So this is how I would do it. Oh, well, that's a very easy question for me. I would definitely choose Japan. I've always been very fascinated with the Japanese culture, and living there would give me the unique opportunity to experience it firsthand. Not only would I improve my language skills, but I would also have the opportunity to learn about different traditions such as calligraphy and tea ceremonies. So yeah, I would definitely go to Japan. Well, everyone, that is the end of English with a Cup of Tea. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the bread that I made. Thank you for joining me and keeping me company. I hope that you learned something today. Please let us know how you would answer that question. Leave the comments down below, and also let us know what other things you would like us to explore in these videos of English with a Cup of Tea. Thank you, bye!